Hello.
Oh, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you as well. So, tell me all about yourself. That's how I always started off. It's always like, how did we get here?
All about myself. How far back would you like to go?
Well, the big news is this play that you had just put together, and it's the playing at the Gene Frankel Theater. It sounds incredibly intriguing. How did this all come about?
Well, okay. Let's go back to um, where I got the idea. A few friends of mine, I was in my, I'd say, teens. A few friends of mine, we got a hold of a VHS copy of The Boys in the Band, and we didn't know anything about it. All we knew was that it was about gay men in New York City. That's all we knew. But we were very excited to see this, gay movie. It was a big thing back then. So obviously, we thought it was going to be like some sort of, comedy or, just it wasn't. It was. We were all quite devastated by it, and it wasn't at all what we expected.
I'm
Um,
disappointing, not a comedy. It's like, whoa, wait a minute.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting some sort of, light comedy with gay men and fun and all that stuff. But, obviously that's not what it was. Um, but I started thinking that life for the one black character who I think his name was Bernard, life for him must have been so much more difficult than for his friends who all, were sort of affluent white
Sure.
middle class guys. And I started thinking what life must have been like to be black and gay and in the 60s, you know. And I thought there's got to be a story there somewhere. So I started thinking about writing a play that encompass all of the things that a black person, a black gay man might have had to experience in the 60s, even in New York. And so I started interviewing, just generally started interviewing older gay men in gay bars. I would just go up to them and ask them, hey, what was your experience like in New York? Were you here in New York in the 60s? What was it like? And generally people gave me answers like, it was really rough. People called you names on the streets. People threw things at you, like if they could detect that you were gay, they would harass you basically on the street. Strangers would harass you. But it wasn't really a story. I mean, like that wasn't a play. So I kept at it for years. And finally, I was at this John LaFleur. He was a famous drag queen in, I'd say, the late 60s, early 70s. And he owned a bar called LaFleur's on 41st Street. And so I was there and I was talking to him. I had done a movie and we had used his bar as for one of the scenes in the movie. And so we were kind of friendly. So I was talking to him and I was saying, like I really think there's something here and I really would like to write this play. And he said, well, I have somebody that you should talk to. And I said, okay, sure. So he sets up this meeting with this guy who called himself Vera. Um, I walk into the bar and he had set us up in his office in the back of the bar. And this guy, he looks me over and he was a very elegant, well-dressed, thin, older man. I'd say he was in his 70s probably at the time. And he kind of gave me the once over and then he told me to go get him a drink. And I said, okay, no problem. And he added, and not that cheap stuff. So I was like, okay. So I asked him if it was okay if I recorded our interview, and he said sure. And he said, honey, have I got a story for you? So he tells me the complete story of what really happened with the mummy in the closet. Obviously, you know the tale of the mummy in the closet. So he tells me what happened and how that came to be. And he said that everyone in the drag community, which was fairly small, the drag community in New York at that time in the 60s was fairly small. He said that everyone in the community at that time knew exactly what happened, but no one had spoken to the police. You know, that's just not something they would do. And the police, quite frankly, weren't that interested in solving the murder. It was like some guy was shot and he was in a closet in some drag queen's apartment. They really weren't, burning the rubber, as they say, to find out what happened there. So the case just went. It's still, to this day, it's still a cold case. But as soon as Vera started telling me the plot, the play just started writing itself.
Sure.
So it was just really, it was like it was meant to be, and I felt like this is a story that really needed to be told, and its time had come, and I was the vessel, and that's how it came to be.
Do you find that easier though to write something where it has the structure there already? There's your event that happened, and it's just you basically just follow the lines, and there it is. How do you create the dialogue when you're writing something like that?
Well, the dialogue was interesting because I don't know what any other writer's process is, but things just come to me. They come to me in the middle of the night. They come to me when I'm out at a restaurant. They come to me when I'm walking the dog. So I just write down little lines and little thoughts and ideas on little pieces of paper and throw them all in a drawer. And then I take that out and try to make some structure out of it. So the dialogue came after I had what I thought were some very well developed characters. I do this thing where it's not my idea. I think it was Noel Coward. No, it wasn't Noel Coward. It was I can't think of it now. But one of the great writers, their suggestion, what they like to do is form an entire profile for each and every character. And then after you've done that, the dialogue comes quite easily after you know exactly who this person is. And I found a trick was I got one of those little 99-cent horoscope books, and you pick a horoscope and it kind of gives you an outline of, a person. And then you can, just pick whatever you think might fit a different character. And that gives you some sort of guideline. So that's where I started. And then obviously you want to tell the story. So the dialogue kind of fit into place.
Yeah, I imagine you have to kind of think, what was it like back? So the play starts in 1993. So what was it like in the early 90s? You probably have to put yourself into that time, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's not hard. I was there.
You lived it, so yeah.
I was in New York in the 90s and experienced most of the things I talk about. I wasn't really that much into the drag scene, but I had gone to balls and I had, obviously gone to drag shows and done drag shows. Years and years and years ago, I used to be a MC for male strippers, and we did it in drag. So I was a drag MC many years ago down the Jersey Shore.
Wow, going way back then though, it was so underground, so New York, and then
Yeah.
been marketed lately, and especially with the rise of RuPaul, who came from here in Atlanta, and it's just like it's amazing. Did you ever think that would even get so commercialized like that?
I really didn't. And to be perfectly honest, I really liked it when it was underground. I liked it being our little secret, but everything evolves. So
yeah, there was a documentary I think I came across about the whole scene, New York City in the '70s with drag and all of that. Yeah, there's a gritty piece of it, definitely.
Yeah, there was, and it was fun. It was like I said, I was in the suburbs of New Jersey, so I would dabble in that lifestyle. I would go into the city, maybe over the weekend or something like that, and then I'd come back and, but it was fun. Those were good times.
So you have stories about, or a story about meeting Dorian Corey. What was that all about?
Okay. So I was at this little theater, and I wasn't aware that there was going to be entertainment. And there were it was a big theater, but there were about 10 people in the audience. And Dorian, they made this announcement, ladies and gentlemen, the fabulous Dorian Corey. And Dorian came out in this full Hello Dolly outfit. I mean, the whole thing, the headpiece, the gloves, the shoes, the red gown, the whole thing. And she did a few numbers from the Pearl Bailey version of Hello Dolly. And it was just great. I mean, I was mesmerized. Mind you, like I said, there were 10 people in the audience. So it was, less than, it could have been if there had been a full audience there. And she had made these little red rhinestone G-strings for these boys. I think there were 4 boys behind her who were kind of like, all they did were, like they were dancing behind her and in these little G-strings, but she did the whole number. She did the encore, she did everything. So, after she finished, the 10 people in the audience, they politely clapped. And I just felt bad. I felt like, oh my God, she went through all this for 10 people, so I went backstage, and I'm like 20 at the time, maybe 21 or something like that. I went backstage and I said, I just wanted to tell you that, that was fabulous. You were great. I really enjoyed it. And she was so sweet. She said, well, you should have seen me in my heyday. That's very sweet of you, young man. But I've played some of the biggest clubs in the world, all around the world. And now this is just something I do to pay the rent. I said, well, I don't care. You were fabulous and I loved it. And I just wanted to thank you. So we talked for a few minutes and then we hugged and went our separate ways. I'd say about maybe 3 or 4 years later, I was at this drag club called Sally's, which was on 43rd Street. It was an after hours drag club in the lobby of a hotel. It was like, I guess at one time it was their ballroom for the hotel, but it had been transferred into a drag bar. And I was there and I was sitting at the bar, and over in the corner in the VIP section, I noticed Dorian, and she was holding court with 4 or 5 of her friends. And she saw me and she recognized me and she called me over, and I came in and I went into the little VIP area and I sat there and we laughed and we drank champagne, and the place closed at like 4 and we stayed there till like 7 in the morning. And it was just a really, really nice experience that I will never forget. And those were the 2 times that I met Dorian. I wouldn't say we were friends, but she definitely knew who I was. And we had that one night, at Sally's.
What was it like when you found out about her death? I mean, that must have.
Well, I was in New Jersey and I saw it like everyone else. I saw it on the cover of New York Magazine and I noticed her. And then I saw, Drag Queen had a mummy in her closet and read the article. And, I was in shock like everyone else. I hadn't known that she had died. That wasn't as publicized as the fact that there was a mummy in her closet after she died. So, that's how I found out about it. So when the guy told me the story of Dorian Corey, I told him also that I had met Dorian Corey and he knew Dorian very well. Like I said, we were acquaintances at best. But yeah, that's how I found out from the New York Magazine.
Wow, that must have been like total shocker. So then you got this all put together, writing the play, getting it out there. What is how do you expect the audience to really take? They're going to learn more about true crime, learning more about the LGBTQIA plus community. Is that kind of part of the goal of putting a play like this together?
Well, I don't know that that was my intention. My intention was to write a great play. That was the only intention I had. Where it falls as far as who accepts it, how, and what they take away from it, and what they get out of it. I guess, yeah. That depends on everyone. I set out to tell a story. I set out to set the record straight on what actually happened, and I think of it as Act Two takes place in 1967, and it was such a different world in 1967. So this is like from me, a love letter to to all the people who had to endure some serious, people complain nowadays about prejudice and being discriminated against and everything. I think it was 10 times worse back then, because you had nowhere to run. The police weren't interested in protecting you. Like today, if someone, attacks you or whatever, you can go to the police and you can say, I was just, I mean, there are hate crimes now. There was no such thing as a hate crime back then. It was, if you were, at some point, not to bash the police, but at some point, it was the police themselves who were abusing gay people because, they thought of it as immoral and against God and all the other things. So it was fair game just to attack people, based simply on their sexuality, and that has changed. But
yeah,
I think we owe something to the people who endured all of that, early on, who fought for us, who fought for our rights, who fought for, just being able to exist. I just those were my thoughts when I was writing the play, especially the Act Two, which takes place in 1967, and it's the beginning of the whole family scene, like where they have families now. The House of Corey was one of the very first houses, and it just came from, I guess it's still the same, but where it originated was people were thrown out of their houses for being gay. Kids were kicked out, no discussion, get out of my house right now. And they were living on the streets and forced to, do terrible things to survive. And there were a few very generous people like Dorian who took in as many people as she could and helped as many people as she could. I describe it in the play as a gay finishing school because people would come to her. She would get them back on their feet. She would, introduce them to places where they could live. She would introduce them to people who might hire them, who weren't homophobic at the time, places you could get a job and start to live a real life. That's a real service to the community. And that all started just from a basic need, from youth, and not only youth, mature people were kicked out too, or found out at work to be gay and fired, and or their wives, caught them with another man and they were, kicked out. All that stuff is in the play.
Yeah. It sounds like you've really got it, especially that second act. It was from our leaders, though, who were looking at it and telegraphing it to constituents that it's a mental illness. And
Oh yeah, it
think
was
that-
until I believe, if I'm not wrong, until 1968 or something like that, it was classified as a mental illness. Homosexuality was a mental disorder, and you could be institutionalized just for being gay.
right.
So, I mean, that's not that long ago,
No. That's just, it's crazy when you think about it. So yeah, I could understand, like, these days, a lot of awareness. We're still going through a lot of growing pains like we did in the
Sure.
60s in another way. But yeah, it's amazing how history kind of repeats itself in a certain way too, but we learn more on the second go around. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. It really is. Do you have any context about Robert Worley, the Mummified?
When I started, after I spoke with that older gentleman, I started doing my research, and I just got a little obsessed with the whole story because it was so bizarre and so wild. And there's very little out there on him. There were a couple of pictures, and there were some statements from his brother. But there was very little. I mean, and his police record. He had a very lengthy police record. But that's really all I could find out about him. So, and I kind of like that too, because it gave me a leeway to just kind of create who I thought he was and what I thought he was about. He was convicted of rape of a woman. And he was convicted of a lot of assault charges. So, and he probably, I'm just putting this together, and this is what I sort of imply in the play. He probably had some internalized homophobia for what he was actually doing with Dorian. They were lovers. And so that probably, a lot of his hate probably stemmed from that, and a lot of his anger and a lot of his violence. So, yeah, that's all I really knew about him. And I it was fun, filling in the blanks.
Really had to use some serious imagination to kind of recreate that and try to get the character down, I'm sure.
Right.
Very challenging, I'm sure. So how did it all come together as far as getting your cast and crew together? What was the process like for that?
Well, the casting was fairly easy. I shouldn't say that. The one part, there's one character that I based on the older gentleman that I met in the bar. Vera, I called him Velma. And so Velma in the play she was kind of difficult to cast, because Velma had to go from being 25 to 57 and sassy and really a character. It's a really cool part. I think it's an actor's dream to play all of Velma. Velma really carries the show. So that part was a little difficult. We auditioned. Oh my God, we auditioned on Backstage, and mind you, this is during COVID, so we had to audition on Zoom. So we auditioned probably 250 actors. Over a long span of time. And we got to Isaac. Isaac plays the part, and he is just incredible. I guess it's the sort of thing that it's either the character is either in you or it's not. And it is definitely in him. He is not acting. He kills it. He keeps us in stitches. Like just about every rehearsal, we are just, he discovers something new and runs with it, and it's just so much fun. It really is. The other characters were fairly easy to cast. Again, we're in New York, so there are thousands of actors, and this was during COVID, so there were thousands of out of work actors, and so the casting was fairly easy, except, like I said, for Velma.
Well, Isaac Dean sounds like a great actor, and you got a fantastic cast, I'm sure. Yeah, no shortage of actors, and it's heartwarming to see the theater coming back, but of course we have to have the protocols in place. Do you have that in place at the Gene Frankel Theater?
Well, yes, we are going with whatever the protocol of the day is when we open. Everything has been changing. There's been some confusing messaging out there as far as who is supposed to be checking, and if you have to wear a mask inside, if you are vaccinated. The mayor has been sending out literally weekly updates as to what is the rule of the day. So we open on September 10th,
right?
And whatever the proper protocol on September 10th is, that's what we'll be doing. Right now, they're saying that everyone has to wear a mask inside the space. There's no difference if you've been vaccinated or if you haven't been vaccinated. But like I said, that may change by September 10th. Whatever it is, that's what we're going with.
Let's hope they don't have to stick with the masks. Just make sure everybody's vaccinated.
So, it's hard to laugh with a mask on,
It is, yeah.
Yeah. But
you see the audience's faces.
Yeah.
Wow. It just sounds like a really, really intriguing story. So how did you end up here? Circling back, as the old saying goes. How did you end up becoming a playwright? What is your background?
My background, I was an actor, and I acted in, dozens and dozens of plays. And I guess I started writing plays because I'd seen thousands of plays, and I just thought, hey, I can do that. And I think, my voice needed to be added to the masses. And so that's probably why I started writing plays. I haven't written that many plays. I've written like 5 plays and produced them in, the metropolitan area. And I guess it's after the first play that I wrote, getting the feedback, and there's nothing more gratifying than putting your words on paper and then having someone else bring them to life. That was such a cool experience for me that I really got hooked. And I love bringing a story forward or telling a story. Most of my stories are real stories about real people. And I love an actor taking what I have started to the finishing point. That's just such a cool process. And hearing the audience laugh at something that you wrote is also, a really, really cool thing. And I did feel like there was a void in the gay, Black, male experience. So I've had that for all of my life. So I just felt like there may be some more stories that needed to be told in that genre.
Did you grow up in the New Jersey, New York area? Is that
I
what you're
was
written about?
born in New York. I was born in Southampton, Long Island, actually.
Oh,
And then my family moved to New Jersey, and I grew up in a little town called Summit, New Jersey, which is, middle class, kind of, nice place to live, great place to raise a family. Um, Not so great if you're an artist and you're looking to experience things, but a nice place, close enough to the city. It's 30 minutes from New York. So that's where I grew up. I I went to school in New York and in Chicago, and then I went to California and I lived there because I was going to break into show business, and that seemed to be that seemed to be the place to go. Sitting on a sitting on a stool at a at a at a drugstore waiting to be discovered. Um, Needless to say, that didn't happen. But I went to acting school out there, and then I came back to New York, and I went to acting school here, and after college. And so, yeah, I've always been pretty much in this area. A few years, I was here and there, but I've pretty much been in this area most of my life.
excellent. Well, that's being 30 minutes from New York City is not too bad. It's like, it's not like you're in the cornfields of Iowa and you have a long ways to go. That's so you're positioned quite well, even though you're with a lot of people who probably don't even understand the artist. It's I'm sure that's got to be really difficult.
Well, there was the train. I jump on the train, and I could be in New York in a half hour, and that got me through a lot of time in New Jersey.
Yeah, yeah, it's wonderful. So going back to the play, how did you find your director, Lawrence Schwartz?
Yes, Larry, we found again after interviewing many actors. I basically put an ad on what was it? It was Playbill, and Larry was one of many actors. I mean, many directors who answered, and his sensibility to the he's a straight uh, he's a straight man with lots of experience in the theater and lots of directing experience, but he's got some real sensibilities to the material. Like I didn't um, look for a gay director or a black director or a straight director. I was just looking for the best director I could find. And Larry really understood after he read the script and we had a discussion about his thoughts on the script. I felt like he really got it, and if you had asked me before, I would have said, I think, I might want somebody who has experienced this scene because they can bring more to the table. But his sensibilities as far as the material and the actors and the humanity of the story, it was there. So that's why I chose Larry. And he is just brought out so many different sides of the story, that even things that I didn't see and didn't realize and didn't know about what I wrote, so that has all been a blessing, and it's just been really cool to work with someone with so much experience, so much human experience. It's not about being gay, it's not about being a drag queen, it's about the human experience and how we relate to each other, and what we need from each other and what we get from each other and what we put out. All that is dialogues that Larry brings to the production, and it's just been great.
Excellent. It sounds exciting. So anything the audience you think is going to come away with, any theories that we're just going to leave that a mystery as to how they think this all happened? It's just like, is it a big question mark? Obviously it should be when you leave.
Well, I don't really. I'm telling the story as it was told to me. I'm telling what happened. I know that there are so many different theories out there as to what happened. I mean, just to back up a bit for people who might not know, Dorian Corey was a very famous drag queen. She was in a film, and she had a certain air about her. She was a very, I call her a grand dame, because she was very proper, and she was just very wise. And in the movie, she sort of just sits there and spews her wisdom, to anyone who's listening. And she was a wise person. And when she died of AIDS. And when she died, they found in the back of her closet, there were a friend of hers. She had asked a friend of hers named Lois to go and sell all of her costumes. She was a costume designer. She went to Parsons School of Design. She graduated from Parsons. And she was an incredible costume designer. She designed costumes for the balls back in the 60s, when they had these huge moving parts and feathers and 20-foot trains on gowns and stuff like that. And she designed all that stuff. So she asked Lois to sell off her costumes that were in her closet. And then after she died, Lois went with two gentlemen who were looking for Halloween costumes, and they went into her closet, and they started going through all of her fabulous creations. And they were pulling stuff out, and in the back of the closet, there was a chest. And it was one of those, they opened the chest, and inside the chest was one of those, the garment bags, the plastic heavy garment bags, was a garment bag, and it was really heavy. And they thought they had found like this incredible costume that, weighed 100 pounds or something like that. And the zipper was broken. So they took a knife and they they cut it open. And when they cut it open, the smell came out the first thing. And then when they looked in, they saw human remains. So they called the police. The police came and opened it up. And this man had been shot in the head one time in the head, and wrapped in naugahyde. Naugahyde was a like fake leather material that they used back in the 60s. It was really plastic, but he had been wrapped in this naugahyde so that the body was mummified. It had actually been preserved, and it was very delicate, but it had been preserved in this naugahyde. So that's where the headlines, "Mummy in the Closet" and all that stuff came from. But that is a true story. And that is the story that, the play is based on. What happened to him? How did he end up in this closet? Why at the time, he had been there 25 years.
Yeah.
What in the world? If he was obviously killed, and why didn't they dispose of the body? Why would they keep the body there all that time? All these questions. So all these theories came about that, that Dorian had shot him, or that he had broken into there when he was found in the trunk. There was a note on the trunk that said, "This poor man had the misfortune of breaking into my house." So that did she even know him? There were all these questions. It was later determined that she did indeed know him, but he had been in jail, and his family really wasn't looking for him. From what I gathered, they were sort of glad to be rid of him. Not that they wished him dead, but they were glad that, he was wherever he was, whatever he was doing, they were just as, just as happy to let him be wherever he was. So that's why nobody was looking for him. And, like I said, he was a, at best, third-rate hoodlum who nobody really, sad to say, but nobody really cared that he was missing. So that's why he was not looked for all those years. And all of the different scenarios on how he ended up in that closet over the years, after it was on the cover of New York Magazine, everyone had their theory on what happened. And I think that's kind of cool to to shuffle through all the theories as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's so rich in evidence. You preserve the body in the plastic and all of that. And then like nobody wanted to do anything. Even in 1993, it's just like let it fade. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So they're rumbling that they'll reinvestigate, or is that just rumor at this point?
Well, I thought, and people disagreed with me, but I thought that we should try to open the case. It's a cold case still. And I mean, the information that I have is minimal, like somebody told me this, is probably not enough to reopen a case. But I think it's kind of sad that it's, that, I mean, he was somebody's son and somebody's brother, and, just to let it, slip away and nobody to really care about it. I think there should be some final closure there. That's part of the reason I wrote the play. As far as, anything legal, I'm not sure if this might spark. That would be nice if this sparked a reinvestigation of the crime, and maybe they could close the case finally after 50 something years. That would be nice, but who knows where that'll go or how that'll go.
Very good. So how did you arrive on staging this at the Gene Frankel Theater?
Well, I wanted an intimate space that you could feel like you were there. Like I didn't want to do this on a really big stage. I wanted the audience to experience the play firsthand, up close and in their face. So the Gene Frankel is beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a beautiful little theater. It's got so much charm to it, and there's audience on two sides, and they're fairly close to the stage. So I searched around at many. Again, this was during COVID. I searched around and looked at many theaters, smaller venues. And this one just, I don't know, I walked through the door, actually not even walking through the door. When I saw the outside of it, I just got this really good, positive feeling from it. And once I walked through the door and met Gail, she seemed so open, and she said, "This is exactly the kind of piece that we'd like to produce here. This has our name all over it." And I felt the same way. I just felt like the theater and the play both go hand in hand very, very well. And I was very happy that we were able to get the theater. We are actually the first full production that they will have produced in the past 20 months, or since the initial shutdown. So we're very proud to be that as well, to reintroduce the theater to the public, who have been starving for that entertainment, and for the past 20 months.
Excellent. Case Closed, the Dorian Corey story is playing at the Gene Frankel Theater, September 10th through October. It's actually a month, September 10th through October 10th, 2021.
Yes.
Sounds fantastic. Please, anybody visit New York, residents, please support the theater. This is really a big thing, and it's coming back, and this is fantastic. So great to hear from you, Jeffrey S. Jones. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robert. It was great meeting you.
Yeah, great meeting you as well. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.